You weren't really going to use it, were you? That was what my cousin Tyler said as he laughed, holding up my savings jar like it was some cheap party prop. I stood there in my grandmother's old kitchen, where we used to make peanut butter fudge together every December, watching as the last of my Christmas savings spilled out like it meant nothing. It was December 22nd. The snow was thick outside, and the house smelled like cinnamon and pine. But inside me, something froze over completely. They were planning a ski trip to Aspen. My money was the deposit, and all I could do in that moment was tighten my grip on the edge of the table and say, quietly, "You didn't even ask." My name is Aubrey Daniels. I'm 32 years old, and until that moment in my grandmother's kitchen, I honestly thought I was the glue holding our family's holiday together. I work as a part-time librarian in Cedar Ridge, Oregon, a small mountain town with wooden lampposts that wear red ribbons in December and a bakery that smells like dreams. My job isn't glamorous, but it's steady. Every weekday afternoon, I shelve books, run story time for local kids, and teach seniors how to use the library's computers. It's a quiet life, and for the most part, a lonely one.
But I like it that way.
Because I've had enough noise and drama to last me a lifetime. I live in my late grandmother's house, a 2-bedroom colonial just outside town. She left it to me in her will, said I was the only one who ever kept the firewood stacked right and the spice rack full. It's old, drafty, and the roof leaks every March. But it's mine. I pay the property taxes with pride. I hang the lights myself every winter. And every year since she passed, I've hosted Christmas dinner just like she did. Baked ham, her sweet potato pie, and a pot of mulled cider bubbling on the stove. This year, though, I was finally ready to go big. I'd been saving since February, putting every extra dime into a little green glass jar labeled Holiday Fund. Tips from tutoring, weekend shifts, even a few handmade bookmarks I sold at the town craft fair. I was planning a Christmas miracle. I'd bought little gifts throughout the year. Wool socks for Uncle Jim, lavender hand cream for my Aunt Marla, and a new art set for my niece Sadie. But the real plan? I was going to surprise everyone with a family sleigh ride through the mountains on Christmas Eve. Hot cocoa, horses, carolers, the whole thing. Something beautiful. Something we all needed. Because despite the cinnamon and tinsel, my family has been unraveling for years. It started small. My uncle and aunt argued constantly. My cousin Tyler moved back home after burning through his college savings partying in Arizona. My older sister, Melanie, once so grounded, got involved with a shady business partner and stopped coming home altogether. She texts once a year, usually on her birthday. But no matter what happened, I kept the tradition alive. I lit the fireplace. I baked the cookies. I made it seem like the holidays still meant something. I guess I thought if I kept pretending things were normal, maybe someday they would be again. That day in the kitchen, when Tyler reached for my holiday jar, I was prepping pie dough. The window above the sink was fogged with steam, and Bing Crosby was playing on the radio. I'd just finished rolling the crust when he walked in, clapped snow off his boots, and gave me that look, half charming, half cocky. He smelled like bourbon and entitlement. "Hey, Bree," he said, using the nickname only he still tried to use. "Listen, about this trip to Aspen. I didn't even look up." "What trip?" Tyler scratched his head and leaned on the counter like he was telling me something hilarious. "Me, Cassie, and the crew were heading up on the 23rd. Just 4 days, nothing major. But I needed a down payment. And I figured, hey, you always say Christmas isn't about money, right?" Then he walked over to the hutch in the corner, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out my green glass jar like he knew it was there. I froze. "Tyler, what are you doing?" He didn't even flinch. "Relax, it's just money. And you weren't going to use it." That jar had over $1,300 in it. It wasn't just cash. It was hope. It was every lunch I skipped. Every Friday night, I spent home editing resumes for people in town for $20. Every thrift store dress I bought instead of new ones. Every choice I made because I believed in creating something beautiful for people who barely saw me. And it wasn't just Tyler.
No.
That same afternoon, my Aunt Marla showed up, complaining that I didn't confirm the guest count for dinner. I need to know how much I'm contributing, she said, but of course, she brought nothing but a tin of stale sugar cookies last year. Uncle Jim grumbled about the ham prices. Melanie didn't even respond to my invite. I was doing all of it, again, and now I was supposed to just accept that the only thing I had to give had been snatched out of my hands.
I didn't yell.
I didn't cry. But that night, after everyone left, I sat at the kitchen table with the green glass jar in front of me, now empty, the words Holiday Fund peeling off in faded Sharpie. I just stared at it, running my fingers around the rim like I was tracing the outline of a wound. And then I remembered something my grandmother used to say. When people forget what something cost you, it's because they never paid for anything with their own soul. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what they thought I was worth.
I didn't sleep much that night.
The wind outside howled like it knew what had been taken from me. But somewhere between midnight and the bitter gray morning, a single, sharp idea slipped into my mind like a snowflake melting on the tongue. They thought they took something I couldn't get back. They didn't realize I was the only reason their holiday plans existed in the first place. You see, while I don't have much, I do have something they don't. Control. Not in the flashy, bragging kind of way they understand, but in the quiet, legal, undeniable kind. Because after my grandmother passed away and left me the house, she also left me something else. Something most of the family didn't know about. A controlling interest in the family cabin upstate. It's a rustic A-frame on Silver Pine Lake. My great-grandfather built it. It's where we used to spend summer weekends fishing and playing cards. When Grandma died, the cabin technically passed into a family trust. Everyone thought it was jointly held. But buried in the paperwork, quiet, dry, unassuming, was a clause she had added just 2 years before she passed. A clause that gave me final say over who had access to the property. And guess what? That's exactly where they were planning to spend Christmas this year. Not Aspen. Not a ski resort. That was just the glamour version of the story. In reality, they'd booked a local guide to do snowmobile rides and tubing on the lake. The trip was happening at our cabin, the one they thought I had no say over. So while Tyler laughed and emptied my savings, and while Aunt Marla fretted over centerpiece colors, I pulled out the dusty manila folder from my bedroom closet, the one labeled Cabin Trust, Emergency Copy. I hadn't looked at it in over a year. But I remembered what Grandma had said the day she handed it to me, her fingers thin and trembling from chemo. You don't have to fight them, Aubrey. You just have to know when you're holding the key. The folder wasn't just paper. It was power. Inside was the notarized amendment to the Cabin Trust. And on page 4, section 12, it stated clearly, in the event of misuse, mishandling, or any perceived violation of communal spirit, the primary caretaker, Aubrey L. Daniels, shall have final authority regarding occupancy and property use, including the right to cancel or deny access without notice. I read it 3 times, the words crystallizing in my chest like ice. They used my money to fund a holiday they assumed I had no control over. But I had the deed. I had the keys. And I had every reservation detail because, of course, they had used my grandmother's email address, which still forwarded to mine. Tyler never even thought to check. They'd booked the trip, sent confirmations, and even ordered food delivery, all to an inbox they believed was dormant. Amateurs. By noon the next day, I had everything printed and placed into a plain envelope. Then I waited. 3 days before Christmas, I invited them all back to the house for a final dinner planning session. They showed up late, loud, and half-interested. Tyler was wearing a smug grin. Aunt Marla had brought a pie from a store, claiming she baked it herself. Uncle Jim was already on his 3rd cup of cider, talking about how the snow up at the cabin was perfect this year. I let them settle in, made small talk, served appetizers. Then, just as they were discussing who would take which bedroom at the cabin, I stood up and placed the envelope in the center of the table. Nobody touched it. So I did. I opened it slowly, laid the papers flat, and said, "Actually, before you finalize anything, you might want to take a look at this." The room shifted. You could feel it. Tyler raised an eyebrow. Aunt Marla squinted. Uncle Jim kept chewing. Then I slid the trust document forward. Tyler leaned in. Read the first few lines.
Scoffed.
Then went quiet. Aunt Marla snatched it, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the pages. What is this?" she asked. I spoke calmly, almost sweetly. "It's the updated trust agreement for the Silver Pine Lake cabin. Grandma added this clause before she passed. It gives me the final say on use of the property." Silence. Uncle Jim finally put his fork down. "So, you're saying you can stop us from using it?" I didn't flinch. "Not just stop you. I've already canceled your access for the holidays." Tyler exploded. "You can't do that. You have no right." I pointed to the page. Section 12. Final authority. "I do." He looked like someone had poured cold water down his back. "Are you serious?" Marla snapped. "You're going to cancel Christmas over a misunderstanding?" "No," I said. "I'm canceling your plans. Christmas will still happen. Just not the one you stole from me." I walked over to the fireplace, pulled out a small black box, and held it up. It was the cabin's master key. "I've already changed the lockbox code," I said, "and the security system. So, unless you want to be arrested for trespassing on property I legally control, I'd suggest you cancel your snowmobile reservations." They didn't speak. For the first time in years, they didn't have a single excuse ready. Tyler was the first to break the silence. His chair scraped back sharply as he stood up, pacing behind Aunt Marla with the kind of theatrical disbelief you only see in bad high school plays. "This is so typical of you, Aubrey. Always acting like you're better than everyone else. Just because Grandma liked you best doesn't mean you get to play God." I didn't even blink. "I'm not playing God. I'm playing the executor of a legal document. Big difference." His face twisted like I'd slapped him. "You can't just take away our Christmas." "You already took mine," I said, steady. "You did it without asking, without thinking. So no, I don't owe you anything this year." Aunt Marla chimed in, clutching her fake pearl necklace like it could shield her from accountability. "Aubrey, sweetheart, this isn't like you. You're the quiet one, the peacekeeper. This isn't your style." "Maybe it should have been," I said. "Maybe I've let everyone walk all over me because I thought that was love. I thought keeping the peace meant keeping silent." Uncle Jim, who had stayed seated the whole time, looked up at me with half-lidded eyes. "You're just bitter. That's what this is. A bitter little librarian with no husband, no kids, nothing but her grandmother's hand-me-downs." The words didn't sting, not like they would have a year ago. Instead, I laughed. Just once. A soft exhale through my nose. "I may not have a husband or kids, but I've got integrity. I've got peace. And I've got the courage to say enough. That's more than I can say for most of you." Tyler turned toward the front door like he needed air. "We already paid the deposit on the snowmobile tour. And the catering. We're gonna lose money because of you." "Oh, the irony," I said, arms crossed. "Almost like losing money you didn't mean to give up is awful. Imagine that." He turned back toward me, his voice rising. "You're so self-righteous. You think this makes you strong?"
"No."
"You're just petty." "No," said a voice from the hallway. We all turned. It was Sadie, my 14-year-old niece. Melanie's daughter. She'd arrived earlier with Uncle Jim, been listening from the stairs. She stepped into the room now, eyes wide, arms folded tightly around her chest. "She's not being petty," Sadie said. "She's finally saying what no one else had the guts to." The room fell into another hush. Uncle Jim sat up straighter. "Sadie, honey, don't get involved in this. It's not your place." Sadie shook her head.
"No."
"I'm tired of watching this every year. Aunt Aubrey saves Christmas. Every year. She buys the tree. She cooks everything. She even wraps your gifts because you're too lazy to do it. And you repay her by stealing from her." Tyler rolled his eyes. "Oh, please, you're just a kid." "I'm not blind," Sadie snapped. "And I'm not dumb either." That hit different. I watched her, stunned. This girl, quiet, always tucked into her sketchbook, always sitting in corners during family dinners, was now defending me in a room full of people who'd never lifted a finger for her either. Marla's tone suddenly softened. Sweetheart, no one meant to hurt Aunt Aubrey. We just got carried away. With her money, Sadie said, and her cabin, and her kindness. For a moment, no one knew what to say. So, I stepped in. I'm not asking for an apology, I said. Not anymore. What I am doing is changing the rules. If you want to come to Christmas dinner, you're welcome. But you show up empty-handed, you turn around and go home. You speak disrespectfully to me or anyone else at the table, you leave. You want to be a part of this family, start acting like it. Otherwise, I'll spend the holiday with people who actually value kindness. Tyler snorted. So, what? You're gonna sit alone with a pinecone centerpiece and feel morally superior? No, I said. I've already invited a few neighbors, some folks from the library, and a couple of families from the shelter. People who know how to say thank you. People who don't treat generosity like a doormat. Marla started to speak, but I cut her off. And one more thing. I called the snowmobile company and canceled the reservation. I told them the card was used without permission, and I reported the charge as fraud. Because, legally, that money was stolen from me. Tyler's face drained. You're bluffing. I'm really not. Uncle Jim groaned and stood up. I need a drink. You've had 3, I said. And I think you've had enough. He paused, met my eyes for the first time in an hour, and then trudged out of the room, muttering to himself. Sadie moved closer to me, standing just a few feet away now. Can I still come? I mean, to the real Christmas. I smiled. You were always invited. She nodded. I can help cook. I remember how Grandma made her yams. I blinked away the sting behind my eyes. Marla looked torn, her hands nervously wringing her pie tin. Aubrey, maybe I've been a little harsh over the years. I'm not proud of that. I guess I always thought you'd just take it. I know, I said. You all thought I'd just keep taking it. Tyler mumbled. So you're just gonna cut us off forever? I shook my head.
No.
But from now on, I set the boundaries. I've done everything I could to hold this family together. I've done it with grace, with silence, and with sacrifice. And all it did was teach you to expect more from me and less from yourselves. There was nothing left to say. That night, one by one, they left. Marla first, then Uncle Jim, still grumbling. Tyler stayed longest, lingering like he wanted to say something else, but ultimately left in silence. Only Sadie remained. She helped me clean up. We folded napkins and washed pie plates while Silent Night hummed faintly from the old radio. I never knew you were so strong, she said softly. I didn't either, I replied. But I think I finally understand what strength looks like. She nodded, then picked up the last glass from the table and said, Let's make this year different. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it could be. The next morning, I got up before the sun, brewed a fresh pot of hazelnut coffee, and stood on the porch watching frost bloom over the garden fence. Everything was still, peaceful, but inside me, a storm had finally passed. For the first time in years, I wasn't scrambling to fix other people's messes. I wasn't tiptoeing around feelings or overcompensating for silence. I had drawn the line and left it drawn. I spent the day cleaning and preparing. Sadie had slept in the guest room, and when she woke up, she came into the kitchen already rolling up her sleeves. What do you want me to start on? She asked. Her voice was clearer now. No hesitation. I handed her a bowl. Let's start with Grandma's cranberry chutney. We worked side by side, just the two of us. As we sliced oranges and simmered cinnamon sticks, she told me about school, how she felt invisible most of the time, how people assumed she was like her mom. She admitted she didn't even like Christmas that much until now. I always thought it was about smiling through things, she said. Pretending. I looked at her. I thought that too. But I don't think Grandma wanted that. I think she wanted us to mean it. The love, the tradition, the giving. Later that day, we drove into town to pick up extra plates and folding chairs. I stopped at the bakery and asked Susan, the owner, if the invitation was still open for her and her boys to come for Christmas dinner. She smiled wide. They'd love that, she said. We haven't had a real Christmas in 3 years. Next, we went by the library. I left handwritten cards for 3 of the older patrons who usually spent the holidays alone: Mr. Barker, Miss Eloise, and Mrs. Landry. They'd been kind to me in quiet ways all year. It was time to return the grace. By Christmas Eve, the house was glowing. I lit every candle in the drawer. I strung popcorn and cranberries with Sadie and draped them across the tree. We found an old record of Bing Crosby and Nat King Cole and let it play on repeat while sweet potato casserole browned in the oven. The aroma of nutmeg and turkey filled every corner. At 5 p.m., the first guests arrived. Susan and her boys came with homemade rolls and laughter. Mrs. Landry wore a sparkly red scarf and brought a tin of her famous molasses cookies. Even Mr. Barker showed up in a vintage Christmas sweater, carrying a bottle of spice cider and looking like he hadn't been invited anywhere in 20 years. Each person stepped into the house and stopped, stunned by the warmth. "I didn't know people still did Christmas like this," Mrs. Landry said. "They do," I replied. "Right here, they do." As everyone gathered around the table, I noticed Sadie had added handwritten name cards, each with a tiny message. Mine said, "To the one who remembered what Christmas really means." Dinner was filled with stories about grandmothers and recipes, lost loved ones, and books read by the fire. There was no gossip, no guilt trips, just joy. The kind of joy you can feel settling into your bones. And as I looked around, I realized something that hit deeper than I expected. I hadn't just reclaimed my holiday. I'd rebuilt it. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the dishes were piled neatly by the sink, I sat with Sadie in front of the fireplace. She had fallen asleep with a blanket tucked under her chin, cheeks rosy from cider and laughter. Outside, snow was falling. The phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from Melanie. "Heard about what happened. Sadie seems happy. You didn't have to step in, but you always do.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas." No apology, but also no blame. I set the phone down. I didn't need more. The next morning, Christmas Day, I got up early and stood outside again. Same porch, same coffee. This time, the sky was clear. Pink streaks painted the horizon, and the air smelled like pine. That's when Marla's car pulled up. She stepped out slowly, holding a pie. Real this time. You could smell the butter. "I didn't come to fight," she said softly. "I came to say thank you for drawing a line, for finally making me look at myself." She paused, shifting the pie between her hands. "I want to learn how to make Grandma's pie from scratch next year. Think you'd be willing to show me?" I nodded.
Yeah.
I think I would. Later that week, Tyler sent an envelope in the mail. Inside was a cashier's check for $1,300 and a note that said simply, "I was wrong. This is yours." I didn't cry, but I did feel something shift. And that shift was worth more than the money. That week, I saw small changes. Uncle Jim dropped off firewood with no note. Susan invited me to join the town planning committee. Mr. Barker donated a set of first edition books to the library. The ripples had started. But the biggest change?
Sadie.
She started staying over more. She brought her sketchbooks, talked about applying to art school, and once, while we were repainting the living room together, she said, "I never knew family could feel this safe." That's when I knew revenge wasn't about hurting them back. It was about ending the cycle. It was about building something better and letting them come to it changed or not at all. It's been 3 years since that Christmas. The pie crust recipe still lives on the same index card, now framed above my kitchen counter, flour-dusted and yellowed with time. But I no longer need to squint to read it, because now I know it by heart. The house has changed just a little. The roof's been replaced. The porch swing finally got a new coat of white paint. And every year, in early December, Sadie and I hang garlands from the rafters while White Christmas hums through the old radio. The guest list has grown. The librarian's niece started bringing her violin to play carols. Susan's youngest is now old enough to help roll out dough. Even Melanie came by last year, holding a tray of gluten-free snickerdoodles and standing awkwardly on the porch until Sadie pulled her inside without hesitation. "Family is earned," she once told me. "You earned me, And I realized she had earned me back. Marla visits too often. She never shows up empty-handed, and she's learning the difference between control and contribution. It's slow work, breaking lifelong habits. But she tries. And when she slips, she apologizes without being asked. That's new. That's growth. Tyler's still a wild card. He sends Christmas cards now, usually with too many exclamation points, but he's quieter, less condescending. Once, he even asked me for a book recommendation. I suggested one about boundaries. He laughed. But he read it. Funny how healing looks like nothing on the outside, but everything on the inside. And then there's me. I no longer ask permission to be myself. I don't apologize for taking up space, for hosting loud Christmases, for protecting peace, or for saying no to manipulation dressed as tradition. I still make Grandma's pie, but I add a twist, a little rosemary in the crust, just the way Sadie likes it. And I don't worry that Grandma would be upset. She'd be proud that I made something mine. Sadie is thriving. She got into art school with a scholarship and calls me every Sunday like clockwork. Sometimes she sends sketches of our old kitchen or the cranberry strings we used to hang. I keep them all. Last week, she sent one of a tree with roots shaped like hands, each finger holding a name. Mine was in the middle. She wrote, "Some families are born. Others are baked, brined, and buttered into existence." That's when I realized I didn't just survive a toxic family. I redefined family. I carved out a space where love isn't leverage, kindness isn't currency, and holidays aren't minefields. Where people laugh from their bellies and leave with full hearts. It's not a perfect life, but it's honest. And that's enough. And every year, as the snow begins to fall and the scent of cinnamon rises through the walls, I remember the moment that changed it all. The moment I took back Christmas. Not with fury, not with revenge, but with reclamation. By building something real, something worth keeping, even if I had to start over from scratch. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop knocking on the door that refuses to open. And build your own house. With your own recipe. And let the smell of your healing call the right people home.